Welcome, Mellon students. We're going to set up a personal site on GitHub. To start off, you're going to go ahead and register GitHub. Make sure that you're using the same username as your Twitter so that you're creating overlap on your online identity. Once you've registered for your GitHub account, you can go ahead and click on the plus button here in the upper right and name your first repository. Now, the repository name should follow the following convention. That is going to be your username. So in my case, it'll be galarzaalex.github.io. The description is optional. You'll see that this name already exists on my account. The description is optional, but I'd recommend putting something like personal landing page. Make sure that it's public. Initialize that repository with README and go ahead and click on Create Repository. Once you've created that repository, you'll be at the landing page for your username.github.io. This display here is showing what files are in your repository. For mine, I already have some files. For you, it should be blank with a readme.md file in there. Now, what you've done is set up some server space on GitHub. We need to download the GitHub client and clone this repository on your laptop or desktop so that you can sync the files from your local files to the web server. So go ahead and click on Clone in Desktop. If you're setting this up for the first time, you may also see a Setup in Desktop icon over here in the upper left that'll be green. So once you've clicked on Clone in Desktop or that green button that you see when you first set up a repository, you'll be asked to download the GitHub client. And so you'll automatically be taken to a page where that GitHub client exists for your particular operating system. Go ahead and download that, and once you have it downloaded, open it up. On Macs, it'll look something like this. On PCs, it'll look slightly different, more blank white space. Both are going to ask you to sync that client to your GitHub account. So you'll be asked for your username and password. Once you've typed that in, if you haven't, make sure here under Preferences, you are logged into your GitHub account. That way it knows where to look on the server for whose files. So once you've done that, find the plus sign in the upper left corner in both clients. It should be there. And you're going to go ahead and clone that repository. So it'll come up with create first. Instead, you want to clone. Now, I only have the option to clone one repository here because I already have my others cloned. But you should see your username.github.io in this list. You'll go ahead and click on that, clone that repository. It'll ask you where you want to put those files on your computer. Once you've selected, I would suggest finding an obvious spot for your files so that you don't clone that repository and you can't find it on your actual hard drive. So put it under your documents. Wherever you normally work with your files is going to be best. And once you've cloned that repository, you should see that the client works on cloning it. It'll notify you once it's been cloned, and then if you actually navigate to that space, you can double check. And here in my Finder, under my documents, I see galarza.github.io, and your space again will be blanked because you have just cloned a blank repository. Once you've cloned that repository, go ahead and navigate to startbootstrap.com. You can scroll down here on the main landing page and find the landing page template. Go ahead and click on Preview and Download. Download this template. Save the files to where you know they're going to be. And once you've completed that download, what you want to do is find those files that you just downloaded. And this is a very important step. Find these files within the landing page folder or which other template you've decided on. You want to make sure you copy the files inside of that template folder and not the template folder itself. Once you've done that, select all the files, copy those, go over to your cloned repository and paste them into that repository. Now, I've already inserted my files into this cloned repository, but you'll drop those template files, remember, in the appropriate folder hierarchy, into your cloned repository. And so it'll read your username.github.io, and at that first level of that folder, you should see the files from the template that you've downloaded. Once you've done that, you're going to notice back in your GitHub client, I read no changes here because I haven't placed anything into that folder, but you should see a bunch of new items. For PC users, make sure that you click a button here towards the middle left of the client that says show commits or show changes, I believe it'll read. And that way you make sure that you're actually viewing what changes have gone on. Once you see that changes have been made, then you have to push those commits or send those changes up to the web server. So you'll see a list of new folders and new files into that cloned repository. The client is saying, hey, you've put some new stuff into that folder. What do you want me to do with it? You first should put in a summary and description of what those changes are. So for the summary, you'll put something like uploaded template, and then landing page is the template that we selected. And that way you're leaving a note for yourself or anyone else who may be looking at the project of what that commit was all about. Click on commit, click on sync. That will synchronize or push the commits that you've made to the server itself. That will take a little while, and especially for the Mac users, that button might read publish because it'll be your first commit to the repository itself. Once you've committed those changes, there's a couple ways that you can check, other than the client telling you that everything has been synced, for you to check that there are actually some changes happening on the server. So, first way is to make sure you refresh your repository page, and whereas you will have seen a README as the only file existing there, you should see the template files that you've uploaded. Also, you can go to your local cloned repository and open this index.html. So if you've opened that index.html file, what you'll see is a local version of your web page as it exists. Yours will be a default blank template because you haven't made any changes, but you should see the landing page template as it exists in its just skeletal form when you double click on that local index file. So again, you can check on the web server itself to see that there's some files in there. You can see the exact mirroring that's happening on your local hard drive and open this index.html inside of a browser to see that the template's working. Or you can go ahead and visit the site by typing your username .github.io into your web browser, and this is a point where you may see a 404 error. Mine has already been up on GitHub and accepted for a little bit, so mine is working, loading properly. Yours, when you try and navigate to the live URL, which will again be your username.github.io, might present a 404, and if you actually look on your settings for that repository, you'll see this web address here as well, http://galarza.github.io. It's also going to warn you that it may take up to 10 minutes for your repository to be functioning in a live way online. So I've seen this take an instantaneous amount of time, 10 minutes as they say, or up to a full day. So depending on how GitHub is feeling that day, you might be limited to checking your work by, again, clicking on your repository and making sure the files themselves are changing in this web view of what's in the repository, or again by working with your local files and seeing as they update, because these files all play together. So if you make changes, you're going to see them popping up in the local version of your files. Now, all that you have with your template is a skeleton with a bunch of dummy text in there that the vendor or the producer of that template has provided for us. So we want to go ahead and start making some changes. So we have to edit the index.html file to start making your website look differently. And you can do this by opening that index.html file from the repository itself and clicking on the pencil button. So you would again find that index.html file, click on it, and click on this little pencil here in the upper right. Now you're in editing mode and you can change this code around. So an easy way to start playing around with this theme is to find where things on the template itself, when you look at it online or locally, where text appears. So if I wanted to change this Alex Galarza and maybe add my middle name, I would here try and scroll through, see where that bit of text is. If you want to be particularly efficient about this, you can do a Command F or a Control F and search for the text that you're looking for. Okay, Alex Galarza, that might be it. This appears multiple times though, so I want to make sure. Here's some context that I can use. I see this H1 tag, Alex Galarza, and then more text below it. That's the same way on the website, so I know this is probably the text that I'm changing. And that's really what poking through code means, is that you look at how it displays on a website, you try and use some context clues to know what you're doing. If you break something, you can always go back in the previous versions, which is the beauty of GitHub and version control software. So I want to add a middle name to this site. I will go ahead and add my middle name and scroll down here, commit the change. And if I want to be extra careful, I can see here the H1 tag has changed to include a middle name in there. I can go ahead and refresh this page. For me, it's a lucky evening. I am able to see that change instantaneously, but if I was still 404ing, say, or it still read Alex Galarza, then I could go to GitHub, sync, because make sure that you are synchronizing what you've just made as an edit on the web side of things to what is being reflected on the local side of things. So it's not going to automatically sync those changes. You have to make sure that you're using the client, that middleman that's talking between the server and your local files, to make sure you're working up to date. So if I hadn't done that sync and opened up this local index.html file, then what would happen is I would see it without my middle name. But since I've synchronized, then when I scroll down here, I see my middle name in my text editor. In my text editor is Alex Gabriel Galarza. Now, if every time we wanted to make a change to our website, we had to go to the repository on the GitHub webpage, open it up, click on the little pencil, make the edits, commit the changes, that'd be a very tedious way to start hacking apart this website. So what we're actually going to do is work with the local files on our computer, and then once we've made the changes that we're happy with, we're going to push those changes, or push the commits, to the web server side of things. And to work with those local files, since we're dealing with HTML and CSS, it's going to be easier to download a text editor, one like Sublime Text, which is free. So go ahead and navigate to sublimetext.com, download the particular version for your operating system. It should be just underneath this demo that you see here going on of Sublime Text. Download the program, open it up. Once you have it open, you're going to go ahead and go to File, Open, and find that index.html file that you should see wherever you saved the cloned repository. So in my case, it's under Documents, galarza.github.io. This index.html file is what I want to open in the text editor that you've downloaded, Sublime Text. My text editor is called Coda, and so I have already opened my index.html file here. I don't want to have my middle name on the site, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that middle name, correct the spacing, go to File, Save. Once that's saved, then the magic of GitHub is going to kick in, and it's going to say, hey, you changed this Alex Gabriel Galarza, now it just reads Alex Galarza. Is that something that you want to commit? And I'm going to say yes, and to be good about this, I'll give a short description. I will commit that change. I will synchronize. It now reads that there's no change, there's no unsynced commits, so I know it's done its work, and I can refresh the page, and again, I'm lucky, it's done it instantaneously. I'm back to just Alex Galarza. So now you're ready to rock. You can make any changes you want on your local files, and I would recommend working with your local files. That way I can change a bunch of things on the site, change my buttons, etc., and then those changes will start to stack up in this client. So you'll see the changes starting to stack up, the red and the green text indicating what was before, what's new, and then once you've done a decent amount of work, you can type in a summary and a description of what exactly that is, commit the change, sync, and then you'll see in a reasonable amount of time that those changes have taken effect on the site. Now that you know how to change your name, I'd like you all to be a bit adventurous and start changing the website as you see fit. So you can change the title here that you see on the very front of the page. This H1 tag. H3 tag has a little bit of a subtitle, as it were, in the default template. You can change the navigation at the top of the menu. So you see here CV, scholarship, teaching. I've changed those. They were originally other items, and those are the things that pop up here on the navigation bar. You can do things like change the buttons, which are here right below the title of the site that you see in the header. You can change these URLs to ones that are functioning for your particular accounts that you see as part of the default template there. So in the default template, you'll see here sbootstrap instead of my username. You'll see the company and then the template that they've put forward here at the GitHub. And then something interesting here is that you can actually change the default button as one that reads that it's linking to a LinkedIn account. You can keep the LinkedIn account if you want. If you want to link to your Facebook, you can do something like change the title of the button itself here. You see Twitter, GitHub, and Facebook are the three buttons that display here, this text, and then you have little icons next to them. So I've changed the text within this button to read Facebook and the icon to one that's a Facebook icon. And I did that by paying attention to how the tag actually works. This ahref is saying this is a link. This class is the way that the button is being generated within the HTML. So we have a button, a default button, a large button, and then you have actually a set of font awesome favorite icons, which if you delved into the files of the template itself, you could see are kind of preloaded icons for you to play with. And while this would have read FA LinkedIn, as this one reads FA Twitter, FA GitHub, then you can change it to whatever particular social media you have in mind, and you can double check which ones are available by going to Font Awesome and looking at the icons here. So here you could even do something like a link to a coffee shop you like, or maybe you like coffee and you have a personal page about coffee. Well, then you don't need to rely on an icon that's linking to a social media source. You can just have this coffee icon as the button here. So you would change this FA Facebook to FA Coffee, and then you would change the button to something like My Favorite Coffee or Coffee Shops, and then you would change the URL to whatever you wanted to point that button to. Now this last step is going to be for the particularly ambitious in the crowd, but if you'd like to start changing the theme around even more, I'm sure one of the first things you notice is that the Moleskine notebook and the glasses that are in the default template has been replaced by a custom image by me. If you want to know how to do that, you first need to find out where that is in the bit of code. So just like for this text, we figured out where is Alex Galarza in the code itself, then we would also need to find where this background image is. And so here's a nifty little trick. For Firefox, it's different. For Internet Explorer, it's going to be different. But for Chrome, you can actually use their built-in developer tools and open those. And if you don't know where those are, you can Google developer tools, Firefox or developer tools, Internet Explorer, Safari, etc. Or you can download Chrome and start using Chrome. And you can click on this little inspector magnifying glass and start waving it around the web page until you find what it is that you would like to change. So I'd like to change this background image, so I'm going to wait until the highlights appear over the whole background image. You can see that if I had been hovering over some text, I could have picked that. I could have picked this H3 heading where it describes a little bit more about me. But since I've selected that image, it's telling me in its sort of own guessed way where that is in the code. So you see here under this styles, this HTML view doesn't give us much of a clue of where this image might be because we don't see an image file. But if we look at the styles here, then we see that, oh, there is a background tag here, and there's what looks like an image file. Mine is futbolín, which is Spanish for foosball, and I've changed what used to be an intro BG image to my own custom image. This is where you're going to have to be a little bit careful, and if you know how to manipulate images, even better. But the size, the quality of the image is going to matter immensely, and so you might break the site if you put in an image that's too small, an image that's too big. So you should find out where this file is in the pack of files that came with the template, because that has to live somewhere. And so you see here, this IMG gives us a clue that it's probably in this IMG folder. And sure enough, here's the original background image. You see there the Moleskine and the glasses. And you should find out a little bit about this file so you can find one that's appropriate. So it's 1900 by 1200. I edited a custom image to fit those dimensions. If you don't have a file in mind or don't have one on your hard drive, you can always do a Creative Commons image search. And try and find a Creative Commons licensed image that's free for you to use. Let's say you like soccer, and you find an image that is appropriate for, why did this go to Jamendo? Well, you can search for an image within Flickr, within these, there we go, we get some soccer images within Flickr, and say I wanted to use this background. I could download this in a size that's appropriate by clicking on the download button. Doesn't look like there is a large enough image for this one, so we'll have to go ahead and find another image. You can tinker around actually in the search parameters for the size of the image that you use. Find something that's roughly those dimensions so that it works for the background that you're looking for. Edit one down that you have. Go ahead and find one. Whatever you want to do, if you want to change that background image, you would then find that image, place it into this image folder, change the name or overwrite intro BG, and then change the code within the appropriate file. Now, if you look for it within index.html, you're not going to find it. So if you go back to the clues that we're using, you can see that this IMG Futbolín BG Dark is actually under a styles sheet. And if you see here, you see it under landing page.css. So these are clues that I'm providing to you, but I'm also going to tell you where they are. Within the CSS folder, that landing page file is there. So if you were to open up this landing page in Sublime Text, or in my case Coda, you could then find, here it is on line 34, that bit of code. So if I wanted to change it back to the original background image, then I would rename that portion of the code intro-bg.jpg. I would save, I would go to GitHub, I would comment on my changes, I would push that commit up to the server, I would sync, and then you'd see that change on the website. So go ahead and be adventurous, change what you want. If you break anything, you can always go back into the repository itself and see a version of the commits beforehand, see what changed there. Here was just an image, but you can also see all the changes in index and say, okay, I knew it was working back here. I'll just revert back to this by either copying and pasting the code or using the revert button as well. Good luck.